Sony created a fair amount of new games for the PlayStation 2, but God of War stands as the console maker's crowning jewel. Fusing traditional hack-and-slash mechanics with context-sensitive events, it was a gritty, smashing success. The sequel is finally primed for release, and due to some divine intervention, we've received a near-final build of the game. After spending a handful of hours mashing our DualShock buttons to bits, it's already obvious that if you like the first game, you might as well start clearing your calendar now for the God of War's Encore. It's bigger, and most definitely badder. At the end of the first God of War, Kratos destroyed Ares and became a god himself. But he soon becomes impatient with the easy life and assembles a Spartan army to systematically take over the living world. Zeus, the leader of the gods, will have nothing of it and decides to take things into his own hands, striking Kratos down and offering him one last chance to take his seat among the gods. Defiant, Kratos is doomed to Hades, where he is rescued, but at an excessive price. He is no longer a god. Faced with mortality, Kratos travels back in time to find a mythical sword and settle the score with Zeus. When you begin the game, Kratos' blades are powered up and ready for action. But after the confrontation with Zeus, they're stripped, and you must begin rebuilding the repertoire all over again. Just like the first game, red orbs are absorbed from your fallen foes. They're then used to power up Kratos' tools of destruction. Then you have other orbs to restore Kratos' magic and health, and a brand new mechanic called Rage of the Titans. Similar to the Rage of the Gods attack from the first God of War, pressing down on both analog sticks will engulf Kratos in flames and allow him to dole out incredible amounts of damage. That's not all that's new. God of War 2 definitely doesn't rest on its renown. The most basic change to the combat is that you can now move while using magic weapons like the bow. The entire game is set up around this, so expect a lot more instances where you'll have to deal with ranged enemies and melee combat at the same time. The basics of melee combat are the same. The square button represents weak attacks, with the triangle button acting as your strong strikes. Based upon what we've played, the button smashing gameplay has been toned down a bit in favor of a more evenly dispersed mix of puzzles, platforming, and boss fights. Speaking of which, people complain that there weren't enough of these epic battles in the first game, and Sony's Santa Monica studio has definitely listened. God of War 2 is absolutely dripping with them. From the opening sequence that takes place across an entire city to the more intimate skirmishes, the cast of foes is wide-reaching and larger than we ever imagined. For every boss encounter, there are just as many mind-blowing set-piece events. Many utilize the same context-sensitive system the boss fights use, where you must enter in a specific button and analog stick sequence under a strict time limit. You'll see a lot more random uses of this as well, so keep your fingers close to the buttons at all times. Kratos was a master of navigation in the first game, and nothing's changed here. You'll spend a lot of time climbing, hanging, or otherwise finding your way through the game's predominantly linear levels. In a nod to classics like Castlevania and Bionic Commando, Kratos can use his blades to grapple onto objects and swing across large gaps. It's obvious that this was a part of the design from the start because the mechanic is a huge thread in the fabric of the game. Rounding out the list of new features is the ability to hop on the back of Pegasus and head skyward. You'll take the winged steed for a spin with regularity, and you have a surprising amount of control over what you're doing. You can boost, slam rival pilots on either side, and use the blades as you normally would. Unfortunately, we've reached an impasse with the build that we received, and oh how it hurts. After a handful of hours, we find ourselves totally hooked and ready to hunker down for the long haul. But alas, the gods have intervened and only allowed us to deliver a preview at this time. It's already looking like a longer game than the first, and there are plenty of challenge modes to tackle once the story mode is complete. Look for our full verdict on the God of War's latest path of destruction in the very near future.
This is not the end.